This is going to be a 20-minute talk given in 8 minutes. And so I will highlight a few things about scaling relationships, metabolic ecology of social animals, including ants, humans, and members of the Brown Lab. That's not meant to imply that members of the Brown Lab are not humans. So you've seen several plots that look like this. I won't go over this other than to say that what metabolic theory says that it's the geometry of networks that constrains individual cells to, my slides are funny, that's okay. Networks constrain cellular metabolism in forcing the cells of larger animals to run more slowly. And so we can think that bigger animals are slower, small things live fast and die young, and we expect to see rates of physiology, rates of life history and ecological interactions to scale with this mass to the negative quarter power. So we're looking for big things to be slow, and one of the questions is that true for social animals? And here's a social animal who is actually quite typical in many ways. Jim Brown's metabolism is predictable from his body mass, more or less. Despite never stopping for lunch, Jim Brown eats approximately 2,000 calories a day, or metabolizes at the rate of 1,000 or 100 watts. And so there's a lot of human physiology that's quite predictable from our body mass. There are also things that are very unusual about humans, and we can characterize those or one of the most remarkable is that humans' metabolism is not limited to their food. Right? Humans fuel their activity by extracting what we could call industrial metabolism from the environment, and we extract a lot of it. Those of us who live in North America extract the order of 11,000 watts from fossil fuels, and only compared to our 100 watts that we get from food. And so these fossil fuels are also delivered by networks. We know that networks constrain the delivery of energy in animals through the cardiovascular network. We also have these networks, shipping networks, road networks, rail networks, that deliver energy to humans in societies. And then we have infrastructure networks, information networks, banking networks, all sorts of things that regulate that. And so there's sort of a parallel that we can try to draw here between the metabolism that we cycle through the networks inside our bodies and metabolism that we draw into our bodies from the social networks that we've constructed as modern humans. And we can ask questions about physiology and whether our physiology at all relates, or our life history relates to that energy consumption. And so this is work that I did with Jim when I was just starting out here as a graduate student. We can ask the question of how fertility rate depends on metabolism. And we can do that in animals quite easily. This is showing a typical scaling plot where small animals have fast reproductive rates, fast mass-specific metabolic rates. Large animals like elephants are slow. And instead of the typical plots where we plot these reproductive rates against mass, we're going to plot them here against metabolism. And so instead of seeing quarter powers, we're expecting to see negative third powers, and that's in fact what the data suggest. So big things reproduce more slowly in a predictable way. Primates are not particularly unusual, although they reproduce a little more slowly than other animals. And so we could again ask this question, well, where does Jim Brown fit on this plot? I realized that was the wrong question to ask. It's, where does Astrid fit on this plot? Jim Brown doesn't fit on this plot at all. And it turns out that Astrid and all the rest of us in this room fit on this plot in a strange way. We plotted here individual, you see the same mammal data that you saw before, and we've added to this plot the red triangles down the bottom, which represent individual modern human nations. Each one of those triangles is a separate nation with the per capita energy consumption of people in that nation. And the annual fertility rate represented as births per female per year. And what you see is that it actually continues this same trend. And we thought this was really, really interesting, that the scaling relationship between fertility rate and energy consumption holds when we measure energy consumption in modern humans as the total energy that we consume. So this was surprising. Another way to understand this is that we could consider that each North America American consumes the energy of a 30,000 kilogram primate. We've done the scaling analysis that is about the size of King Kong, and reproductive rates have dropped accordingly. So we reproduce very, very slowly. We consume, and we consume a lot of energy. The ecological implications of this are pretty scary. The paper that Pablo mentioned earlier that he and Jim are co-authors on that came out in Nature just a few days ago talks about the problem that, of human impact on the environment due to our population growth and our energy consumption. And this sort of suggests that those two things are linked. And they're linked in ways that makes it apparent that we're not going to stay on our current trajectory and solve our ecological sustainability issues. There are a number of other relationships that have been found in kind of analyzing humans in this macro-ecological context. Some of them have intriguing quarter power relationships that mimic those or sort of echo those that we see in animals. One of the most interesting ones of those is this relationship between per capita energy consumption and per capita GDP, a relationship between economics and energy consumption that has this also kind of intriguing three-quarter power scaling relationship that appears. But in all of these cases where we see these echoes of three-quarter power scalings, we think that the explanation must somehow be different, right? We don't, while we have networks that deliver energy to us, they don't follow the hierarchical fractal three-dimensional topology that our cardiovascular network has. And so we don't really know what generates these scaling patterns in human populations. I think it's an intriguing and important question. And a lot of people have gathered more data to look at this question. Many of the scaling relationships that we've seen don't follow these three-quarter powers and are quite surprising. The one up at the top, while there's a lot of scatter in the data, is one that suggests that territory area is sublinear with population. This is in hunter-gatherer populations. It means as humans gather together in larger groups, you can pack more people in the same unit area and extract more energy per unit area to feed those people. In modern cities, we see this thing that sort of is characterized as increasing returns. When you look at things like creativity and wealth, also negative things like crime, anything that comes from the interaction of people